Hey, welcome back to the Motorcyclist podcast. This is where we talk about motorcycles and what makes them great. As always, the topics on this show are constantly changing, but the one thing that remains is two-wheeled fun. On this episode, we're going to talk about electric motorcycles. That should get a lot of you riled up, maybe some of you excited, and I expect that we are going to have a ton of comments. So what we're going to talk about more specifically is full-size electric motorcycles. This is not going to be a deep dive on every bike that's on the market, but more a look at what's going on in the space, what electrics are good for, what they face in sort of challenges, and then maybe like what we see in the future for these bikes. So as always, we got to kick it off with the hosts and introductions. As always, we've got editor Adam Wahid. We have photo editor Jeff Allen. This is his second show. He's back by popular demand. And you got myself, executive editor Justin Dawes. Every episode, we start this off with what everyone's been riding. So let's start off with Adam. What have you been riding this week?
I've been riding that Vitpillen 801 from Husqvarna again, and gosh, I really like that bike. The more I ride it, the more I like it, and the more I look at it, the more I like it. Some people were saying, it looks kind of silly, and, I kind of thought the same thing, but then when you look at it up close and personal, it's got a unique look to it. I think they did a good job with the exterior design.
Those Vitpillens have always had a unique look, and I think it's a solid update and change to what it was. I mean, like the original design was what, in 2016, 15? I don't remember when they first kicked it off at Eichmann. They showed off the bodywork and stuff, and it was pretty exciting back then. But then it started to get kind of long in the tooth, even though it was modern and very contemporary. Taste changed really, really quick, and so it was getting kind of old looking. So I think this refresh, I think it looks cool.
Yeah, I think so too.
So Jeff, what about you?
Well, as it turns out, I've been riding the Livewire S2 Alpinista, the recently released. I got the chance to. We have one here at the office, and I had a chance to throw a leg over that thing.
Awesome. Well, I guess that's a fortunate turn of events for this podcast. So let's hold your thoughts for later then on that one, so we can talk about it later rather than give away the plot right in the very start of the show, right? For me, I have been riding nothing this week. I have been preparing for travel trips, going to AIM Expo, which is a big industry power sports show. So getting ready for some presentations and meetings for that. And then I did some bike maintenance though. So I'm pumped on that. I revamped the fork seals on my bike. So I changed fork seals, dust seals, bushings, cleaned it all up, new oil. It's fun to actually get into the mechanics of bikes every once in a while and really do a real mechanical job, not just like an oil change or something like that. So it was therapeutic and I enjoyed it.
And it's got to be done.
And it has to be done. Mine definitely need to be done. I had a leaking fork seal for 3 rides, and I was like, I'll do it next time. I'll do it next time. But then on the last one, it was on the brake sides. The last ride, it was leaking really bad, and I didn't stop so good.
Yeah. That's the motivator right there.
Yeah.
Stopping.
I had fork oil all over my brake rotor, and I actually had to change the pads because they got soaked. So I guess I should add a brake pad change to that mechanical. So anyway, let's get into, first off, I want to talk about the audience on this one. I really want to hear what all of you out there think about electric bikes, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever it may be. Let us know. And then I want to know, what would it take for you to go electric? What would you want out of an electric in order to actually buy one? Or would you just never buy one? Just let us know. I want some feedback on it. So let's start off with I guess the current options. There's been kind of a split in recent years between a high horsepower expensive models and then more inexpensive commuter options. So let's talk about I guess it started off more with high horsepower big bikes, right? And we're talking about Livewire 1. We're talking about Energica. We're talking about back in the day, Bramo, we're talking about Zero. Like those are big motorcycles that have some oomph, right? Sorry, my dog.
Your dog's got something to say about electric.
I live on a farm. Sorry, guys. Anyway, he snuck out of the bedroom. Okay, so let's talk about those. Like, what are your thoughts on the current crop that we have now? So we're talking about like Zero has a bunch of options. And Adam, you were just riding one the other day. What do you think about Zero?
Yeah, I love Zero motorcycles. You know, in my opinion, they're doing it the best. No one does it like them in the EV motorcycle category, maybe besides Starkvarg. So yeah, I really like their bike. They have that DSRX that I was riding a couple weeks ago, and yeah, it's a couple years older now in the model lineup, but I like it so much. It just has a honking battery. That's really the biggest thing and the standout feature of that vehicle is it has the biggest battery in probably the electric motorcycle segment, and it just gives it range. It gives it, 90, 100 miles of actual range of, max acceleration range, which is just awesome. So, that's always the caveat with these street bikes is they don't have any range, but that bike solves the solution with a gigantic battery. Yes, it weighs 550 pounds, so it's very heavy, but it'll get you to where you want to go without having to stop.
Right. And there's the thing though, with it's common in a lot of electrics, there's a lot of weight to them, but the battery is usually way down low in the chassis. The motor is usually placed low, and that gives it like a pretty low center of gravity, and they don't feel usually as heavy as they are. Right. Like the scales say this, and you expect them to be like unwieldy when you're riding them, and they're not. You might notice it when you pick it up the side stand or move it around the shop or your garage or whatever. But overall, I think
it's like a big, giant, heavy scooter.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what I think. A big, giant, heavy scooter. Yeah. And it's cool. Like it makes some cool noises, and the fit and finish is pretty good. It always kind of cracked me up because we went on that Can-Am BRP Origin press introduction earlier this fall, and usually when you're manufacturing a vehicle, you'd always want to baseline the competition. And it was just kind of crazy to me that, the Can-Am BRP, they couldn't match what Zero has out right now, which I thought was kind of crazy to me.
And the interesting part is that it's still an emerging segment. And so everyone's all over the place, right? And that's one of the things we're going to talk about in challenges, but they're all over the place in terms of range, power, charging. Like some are just wall chargers, some are level 3, some are level 2. You can't nothing seems to be standard to this point. And that goes to your point of like, Can-Am did it totally different than Zero. I would say that probably like the Livewire 1 is more similar to a Zero, right? But it has some really interesting features itself with like the way that the motor is situated. It's longitudinally mounted, or it's front to back with like a bevel gear instead of being sideways like all the other electric motors. And it was a huge departure for Harley Davidson when they brought it out. Livewire is its own kind of standalone company, but they did some really interesting things with that motorcycle. And I think it definitely is a contender as well in some ways, power, handling. It's got nice brakes. It's got good suspension. And it has some interesting features like that haptic feedback in the seat to like let the bike is on. It's got this little
that's definitely useful. Yeah, because you have to be careful.
Yep, you do. So, and then there was Energica, and emphasis on they actually had like a sport touring bike where it was supposed to have a massive battery. We never ever got the chance to test one, so we can't really say if it was good or was bad, but it was claiming to have the longest range out of any electric, and it was meant to go touring, which was quite a stretch for an electric motorcycle.
Yeah, it's kind of funny sometimes when the electric vehicles, they have a luggage or touring options. It's like, sure, like what I'm going to put in there.
Right. Yeah. So anyways, we have all these big bikes, and that group continues to grow. We'll say like Livewire's S2 Aero platform is also in the big bike category, right? So they have the the Del Mar, which is like a tracker looking thing. You've got the Mulholland, which is a cruiser, which is even wilder, right? You got an electric cruiser. That's
Yeah.
kind of a, I guess you would call it an oxymoron in a bit of a way, but it works. And then you've got the new one that Jeff's riding, the Alpinista. So let's hear it, Jeff. We'll get into it right now. Like, what do you think of that Alpinista?
Okay. I enjoyed my time on it for sure. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I really appreciated it for what it is. Like, if you break it down into bits, like, the brakes are amazing. The power is unreal. Like, it's the torque and like launching that thing off the line, even in the like eco mode or whatever. I mean, in sport mode, it's a rocket. It's awesome. And I was just riding it. Somehow I was like, the parts just don't add up. Like, the sum of the parts, something for me is just missing. And I'm not sure exactly what it was.
Is it the lack of like an engine noise and like sound?
The noise is definitely part of it, because, like, when you ride internal combustion, like downshifting into a corner, the noise and just sort of the tension in the motorcycle, like, that's an indicator to you, like, if you're too hot in this corner, or if you're braking too early or whatever. And that would be something you could obviously learn on the electric bike, but it's different. And like, I can't exactly break it down. I think I said to you earlier, it's like rock and roll. Like, I might know that this guy's a great singer and this guy's a great drummer and the guitar player is awesome, but somehow, like, the song just,
it doesn't speak to you.
It's not speaking to me. And that was sort of what I found with the Livewire.
Interesting, because like your son, who is our associate editor, Alan, he like raves about it. Like, he
loved it. And when we talked about it after I got off, he was quick to tell me how wrong I was. Yeah. And I have to say, he's right. Like, it had things, but it just, something was missing. Something
was missing for you. I mean, that's a fair point, right? And that's when we're gonna talk about some of the issues with electric here in a little bit. So let's talk about some of the smaller stuff. Like, there's another crop. All those bikes are anywhere from 12 to 20 something $1,000, right? Like, they're not inexpensive motorcycles. Then you have this other group of bikes that are like in the 9,000, 7,500 range, like BMW CE02 scooter, which, Adam, you spent some time on that thing, right?
Yeah, that thing, we rode that at the official North American press introduction this past spring too. And yeah, not the coolest e-bike I've ever ridden, but it's cool that BMW Motorrad's trying to offer something, to younger people, even though the price is so high that I don't think any younger person would ever buy that thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's still, $7,600.
Oh, it's more than that. It's almost 10.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I thought it was around $8,000 with
maybe
with,
starts.
No, it's like,
but normal BMW style, probably, right?
Oh, fine.
Yeah. It's crazy expensive.
Yeah,
it's crazy expensive.
I like the look of it. I think I would like that bike. I haven't ridden it, obviously. I wasn't on your press launch, but it looks like sort of like Terminator meets Honda Grom. And I love the Honda Groms. I think that thing is cool looking.
Yeah, see, I like the CEO4 better than the CEO2, but the CEO4 has more of a minivan look, so it looks kind of more funky. It's just but it's more useful because it has a bigger motor. And, yeah, but then of course it's almost 75% more than the CEO2. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's the biggest Achilles heels with these machines is they're crazy expensive.
Yeah,
a lot of times by these.
A lot
big
of times,
brands.
for sure. Yeah, for sure. Well, there's other big brands though, like Kawasaki E1 and the ZE1. I never got to ride them, but our former editor Bradley Adams, he went to the press launch for those and he dug them. Like, he was like, yeah, they're super cool. And the nice part about those bikes are the battery is removable, so you could pull the two battery packs out and take them up to your house, into wherever, and charge them, which is a nice feature to have, obviously, when range may be limited and you need to charge during the day. So you could take them into your office, plug them in, whatever, and do that thing, which is kind of cool. And I will say that is our most successful Instagram video of all time, is just the batteries being pulled out of that center of that bike. It's like 7 million views or something. It doesn't, there's no words, there's no explanation. It's just pulling the batteries out and setting them on the ground. And for some reason, everyone's interested in that. So I would make a point that might be a validation that that's a useful feature for other manufacturers to look at, right?
Yeah.
I would agree. I think being able to, like you say, you bring it into your office, put it under the desk, charge it. That Kawasaki, I think, is like 20 to 80% charges in a little over an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a small range, but that's a no-brainer for a commuter bike.
Exactly. And there's 2 batteries in it, so you can take just one out if you need to. You know, you don't have to take both of them inside. You can just pull one out if you're running low and do that one up and then move on, right? So, but that kind of goes to I believe it's in Thailand, the scooters in Thailand, Go.
Yeah, Taiwan. Yeah,
Taiwan,
Go.
Row.
Yeah.
You know, those things are super rad.
Super rad. Yeah, I like their subscription-based business. You know, you buy the scooter, and then in Taiwan they have a number. I think the last I heard was like 90 of these charging stands where you just go and you take your depleted battery, plug it in the machine. You know, it's like getting a newspaper. You put it in and pull out a charged one, and it's just a monthly subscription. And if you're in a city like that, like there's no time to like refuel your motorcycle. It just
right.
Swap it out.
That's cool.
And I think the nice part about that is, like you said, you buy the vehicle and you're not buying the battery pack. So let's say in the future, they come up with a better battery pack that still fits in that thing. Like you don't have to re-up for a new battery. Like it's just, okay, we've increased everybody's range that owns a Gogoro. You know,
that's cool.
I think I'm saying the name of the company right. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Gogoro. Yeah, and you don't you don't need to carry the battery up to your apartment. You don't need to find an outlet. You just stop. It could be. I mean, I haven't done it, but it could be faster than just fueling a motorcycle with petrol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, if you remember a few years ago, you know, some of the big OEMs came together and signed some type of battery accord.
Yeah.
You know, nothing ever came of that, I don't think. But, you know, I remember KTM, some other companies, they all signed a battery accord. So in theory, they would start, you know, manufacturing batteries that were all the same, that were all compatible, so they could be used in these different manufacturers' vehicles. You know, nothing really ever happened from that, I don't think. But that kind of goes into what you guys are saying. That would be a useful way to leverage technology.
Yeah. Well, perhaps they're still working on it. I mean, that would be a game changer. If regardless of what you rode, a scooter or a city bike or even an adventure bike, if you could swap the thing out with a fully charged battery in just a couple minutes, that would be amazing.
Yeah. I mean, that's a question of obviously infrastructure, and sometimes the private sector has to build out the infrastructure rather than the government, right? And that's what they did with Gogoro, is that they just went, okay, we'll handle it. Like, it's obvious that if we wait on the lawmakers or the government to help us build this infrastructure, it's not going to happen. So they just went out and did it, and it's successful. Granted, it's a small country, high amount of people in a small space in the cities and stuff, for where, you know, it makes sense for Taiwan. Would that make sense for the US? There's a lot of space in between, and we would need a lot more stations than 90 of them.
Well, plus they use a motorcycle a little differently than we do, you know.
Exactly. So let's get on to, like, you know, what's good about electrics? Like, what do you like about them when you're riding them?
Me personally,
either of you guys, yeah.
Well, I kind of like the idea. That's why I think I like the CEO2, the BMW. Is I think I would like an electric vehicle for like the commute. I think for a city bike, you know, like if I lived in LA, I mean, we live down here in Orange County, but if I lived in LA, like just be able to get to the office or go to the store or whatever, I mean, I think it would be really useful to have an electric bike rather than, you know, like sometimes we have test bikes and you jump on, like, you want to take the Panigale to the grocery store, or you just want to, like, do you just want to get on the scooter with the little storage under the seat?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know, if it's electric, it's nice.
Yeah, I mean that makes perfect sense. It's quiet, it's easy. You just hop on it, twist and go. And I think that's one of the things I like about electrics is that they are the barrier to entry in terms of skills is lower, right? Because it's a twist and go. You don't have to worry about doing the clutch. You don't have to worry about shifting. You don't, you have two brakes and you have a throttle, and that will get more people into motorcycling, hopefully. But it's just easier to do, right? You don't have to use a clutch. You don't have to, shift. But at the same time, sometimes a bike needs a clutch, I think, and I actually, on the clutch point, I rode a electric trials bike about 2 months ago, 3 months ago. It was insane. It was super rad because it had a clutch to be able to manage like the pop and the traction of the rear tire, but it was all electric, and it was real nice. I could see one of those happening in your backyard and just hopping all over stuff all day long, and no one would ever care. But what about you, Heath? What do you like about electric?
I mean, just like what Jeff said, I mean, for around town city commuting, they're great. I love riding that DSRX. Yeah, it's heavy, yeah, you know, it's really heavy, honestly, but that heaviness also, it's got a commanding presence on the road. It's a very large vehicle. It's almost like an SUV, kind of like a Hayabusa, where if you're a big human, you're going to fit on that bike really well. And I'm a little bit taller, so I fit on it good. And it's got that really handy trunk, in the front of the motorcycle where typically a fuel tank would be. And that trunk, that thing it's big. It swallows quite a bit of cargo, and you can use it to go to the grocery store. You can use it in a very functional way. And it is twist and go simple. So it's like riding a big giant scooter. The only caveat is really the price. I mean, that vehicle's 17 grand, so it's crazy expensive for what it is. But, in terms of like function, it's very useful, and then, if you have a J1772 plug, at your business or your residence, that thing will charge in 3-4 hours. So it's a totally functional vehicle, and it's relatively devoid of maintenance. It's well built as far as we can tell. And yeah, it has a lot of things going for it, but just like commuting and urban use, I think it's awesome.
So a J set, what was the plug he said?
J17, it's an SAE standard they use for EV vehicle charging, and
That's like level 2, right?
Correct, level 2. So that's one level better than if you just plugged it into your 120 volt 3-prong power adapter.
Mhm.
So it gives you a level of charge, I don't know, like 4 times faster than a household 120. Maybe it's not 4 times, but it's exponentially larger.
Mhm.
And it allows you to have function, and anyone can install those J1772s in their house. It's not even hard.
You just need
Basically,
a
it's just a
240 volt
yeah,
circuit.
240s. Plug in a 240 volt circuit into your existing 240 volt power panel, and voila, you have big power.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So, and I think that's for myself, what I like about electrics too is, besides like, I really enjoy the like instant torque on adventure motorcycle or on electric motorcycles. Like they are rad, like how much oomph they have off the line and all that. But I think there's another thing that's rad is like you said, being able to charge at home, which, especially if you're commuting and you're within the range of what you're normally doing, it's so nice to be able to just go home, plug it in the morning, it's ready to go. You don't ever have to think about going to the gas station, which is it's a nice convenient feature to have.
Yeah, and you're saving money. I mean, not that some motorcycles burn a lot of fuel, but $5 a gallon for fuel, and if you can charge at night when the electricity is more favorably priced, you're not spending a lot of money to put fuel in that vehicle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that cost is much lower. So, and I guess that talking about fuel, that's one of the arguments that people make is like, it's not necessarily clean energy at all the time, right? Like an electric, you have to get that electricity from somewhere. Sometimes it's hydroelectric, sometimes it's wind. Hey, great, you're green, you can feel good about it. But there's other times it's not. It's coming from a coal burning or a fuel burning, gas burning, whatever plant, and you're still using fossil fuels to fill up your electric motorcycle, right? So,
Yeah, it kind
whatever.
of depends what area you're in, and you're kind of subject to whatever the power company uses for power generation.
Very much
good
so.
or bad.
Yeah.
Good or bad, you're in, right? I guess if your house was on like full solar, but you'd have to have a lot of panels to be able to push that much current into charging your bike and keeping everything else going, right? Like,
or just have a big giant battery bank or 2 Tesla power walls, then you're probably dialed, I would assume.
Yeah, exactly.
I know some people have that gasoline versus electric opinion, the argument that one's not as clean as it's claimed to be, but I don't see it that way. I just see it as a second option. Like I'm totally fine having fueling this machine, whatever it is, with gasoline or electric or something else. I mean, it's not really an up or a down for me. It's just an option.
Yeah, I agree. And that takes you to a larger point that like electric motorcycles are not probably ever going to replace ICE, internal combustion engines. Like it's just like, I see it as an addition to your choices in motorcycling. I don't see them as a replacement. And so, I think it's going to be a very, very long time, if ever, that they would even be a possibility of them replacing. It's different with a car. Cars, there's electrics that are, they're great because they can hold a ton of batteries, right? And that's the packaging argument, that we talk about. So, but yeah, let's get into we're kind of already are, but let's just talk about those issues like packaging. Like, you know what I mean? Like you can only fit so big of a battery on a motorcycle compared to a car. Skateboard design, you can put as many as you want, stack them up, whatever. And no one cares that a car weighs 6,000 pounds, but you would care a lot if your motorcycle weighed 1,000 pounds. Right.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, obviously the batteries, the technology will improve. I mean, there are companies like Toshiba and I think Toyota have made announcements about solid state batteries, and like they're making them. They can't make them affordable yet, but they're making them.
Yeah.
And that could be, that could be a big deal. Increased range and faster charge times.
Yep.
But still, definitely. I think I would like to have the option. I don't know that would change my opinion, but I do about gas or electric, but I like options.
Yeah. And I mean, that's with those solid states, if they do come to fruition, that's going to increase range. It's going to speed up charging time. And range is a very, very obvious issue with owning an electric motorcycle. Range anxiety and the range itself and charging infrastructure, right? So, I mean, Adam, you've been riding zero. How, if you're out and about and all of a sudden you go for a long ride, or you're out and you're like, okay, I got to find a charging station now. Now you got to get on your phone. You got to look something up.
Oh my gosh, I don't even want to think about what that would look like.
And then you got to go to the charger.
That's why the DSR-X is so awesome, because you don't have to do that. It has a 100-mile range. You can plan your trip. My trips are never more than 100 miles anyway. So plan your trip, go there, come back, charge it, no problem. But, with other vehicles, like BRP Can-Am's Origin, you have to plan that. That thing has a range of 50 miles. You need to find a charging station. And that's when things can get hairy, But again, good thing, a lot of these companies are adopting that, J1772 adapter, which is becoming much more prevalent in the United States. So in theory, you can probably find a charger, but I mean, range anxiety is a real thing on those motorcycles that have small battery packs.
Yeah. The infrastructure, like Southern California, is not the normal in terms of charging infrastructure, right? Like in the metropolitan areas of Southern California or even Northern California, like you can just go like you can find something, right? But like get outside of urban areas and that it's a totally different ball game. Like I watched man, I can't remember what the guy's name is on YouTube. He he's traveling around the world on a zero. And
Wow.
a lot of the thing is worrying about his range, monitoring his range, trying to regen, going down big hills, all that stuff, but then also finding a place that has a charger. Like he was in like, up in the mountains in India on the way to the Himalayas. And he's like, okay, this place says it has a charger. And you get there and like all the copper's ripped out of it and the thing's broken. And, and he's just like, now what do I do? And then, he's got his like little plug-in charger and then he gets stranded for an extra 8 hours charging his bike, So get outside of urban life and it just doesn't make sense at the moment. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I think like the city bike thing, I think if it's a city bike, you don't need to even deal with the range anxiety because you understand your day. Like I ride all the time, daily, but I don't ride 100 miles every day. So I don't need, I don't need 5 gallons in my adventure bike every day.
Right. Exactly. And then, but there is just like talking about range anxiety in general. It is a thing where it weighs on you a little bit more than fuel anxiety on your motorcycle. Like even when you're like starting to run low on fuel on your bike, you're never like, oh man, like what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I got to be careful. I got to really monitor how far I'm twisting the throttle and what I'm doing. And it seems like you really focus on that more when you're on an electric bike.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Well, I think some of that is too, because when it says on your gas motorcycle, it says, oh, you have 11 miles of range, you think to yourself, it's probably more like 20. Like they're conservative with these estimates, but it's the opposite on the electric. If it says you got 11, you're like, I probably got 5 miles. Like realistically.
Exactly. Yeah. If I'm not careful, I definitely will only have 5 miles.
Yeah.
Well, then too, like you think about it, like you run out of fuel. Well, on a motorcycle, you can hitchhike, you can call an Uber, you just go and get a container of fluid and pour the fluid in and you go. With the e-bike, like you have to literally physically take this vehicle somewhere that has a charger. It's just like, it's way more complicated at times 1,000.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, in Southern California, though, there are AAA vans now with onboard battery packs. Right. And they'll come and plug into your machine and
jump
you back up and give you 5 miles of range to get you to a charger. But that's in Southern California. That's not in the middle of Colorado up in the mountains. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like you said, like if you blow it, it's a much more involved thing to handle than just going to get gas. For sure.
Yeah. And if you're somewhere remote, you can find a farmer who's probably got a couple gallons of gas in the barn, but not necessarily going to let you just sit in his house for a few hours and charge off of it.
Yeah. Hey,
nice one.
Yeah. Let me give you a couple bucks. How does he even know how much to charge you or take from you if you do get the plug in, right? It's like, let me do the calculations. Let me get out my power bill.
Yeah. Well, with the gasoline, he's like, I'll give this guy a gallon of gas and he'll be gone. But the electric,
he'll be out of my hair.
I'm going to have to let this guy sit. I don't know who he is. Like,
yeah, he's going to be here for 3 hours. Like, what's going on?
My watch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and that's another thing is when you are charging, you have to be somewhere with the motorcycle, right? I mean, you could go off and you could go eat lunch or you could go shopping or whatever, but it's not like in a car when you got to charge. You can just sit in your car and listen to the radio and whatever, but on a bike, you're out in the elements. Like you don't have a structure to protect you if you need to stop and charge and be stuck somewhere for a while.
Yeah.
A good point.
There's all kinds of plans for the US government to add, more charging stations. They said they were going to do 500,000 stations by 2030. But even like you think of the size of the United States, and I go, 500,000, is that like a lot? Is that enough? I don't know how
It
many
sounds
gas,
like a lot, but then you're like, maybe that's not a lot.
I'm like, how many gas stations are there in the United States? And then you multiply that by pumps and you go, there's way more gas pumps than there are electric chargers, even at 500,000,
Yeah.
Think about it. It took us well over a century to make the infrastructure we have
Mm-hmm.
today for gasoline and diesel powered vehicles. Wouldn't it stand that it's going to take many, many, many decades for it to have the same infrastructure for EVs?
Absolutely. But I think the other problem is, granted, yes, the EV companies are making, the charger companies are making money, but the margin is not the same for gasoline that it is for electric, right?
Yeah, there's like no margin like gasoline.
Yeah. So, I think that's one of the reasons why the infrastructure isn't bigger here, is because the financial incentive isn't as high as it is to open a gas station, right?
I think in the auto segment too, I think adoption has slowed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the vehicles are so expensive, some of them.
Yeah.
So I think adoption has slowed a little bit. Maybe they're reacting to each other. Maybe adoption is slow because it's hard to find an open charger, or maybe there aren't as many chargers because they're not selling the cars as quickly.
I've owned in my household, I think 3 electric cars: Volkswagen ID4, a Chevrolet Bolt EV, and a Volt, which was like a hybrid. It was a gas. It had gas, so you never really had to worry about the range anxiety. But I
love the Volts.
Yeah, the Volts are cool because they have a hybrid kind of setup where the engine is just a generator. It doesn't drive the wheels. It just makes the electricity to power the electric motors, which is cool. And, there are some options of those on the horizon. You see some hybrids coming out that will be doing that type of thing. But, my experience of like trying to find a charger, even in Southern California, you would go and you'd plug into one and the thing's broken or doesn't work. Okay, all right, this one says it's open over here. You go over there and there's someone plugged into it. Like, it's not as easy as just pulling in and filling up gas. There's no doubt about that. So,
well, like, to your point that it took 100 years to get to the infrastructure we have for gasoline,
yeah,
it was probably a similar situation for the early adopters of automobiles.
For sure. Yeah, you couldn't just stop anywhere and get a bale of hay for your horse, right?
Exactly.
Like, you had a horse, you could stop, you could get a bale of hay, and you'd be on your way. You
from
give
a
it some
farmer.
Water. Yeah, you get from the farmer. Here's your hay. Here's some water. Now get out of here. So all those things definitely add up to making it a challenging thing. On top of they are relatively more expensive than a gas motorcycle. Like, let's talk about the Alpinista. That thing is $16,000, right? And it has pretty impressive performance, but so does an MT-09, and it's like just over 10 grand, right?
Yeah.
12 grand or whatever it is, So, that's another stumbling point is pricing. They are on the whole more expensive than their equivalent in a gasoline burning power plant.
Yeah. Obviously for any of them, increased volume would change that. We're not.
Yeah.
In America, we're not buying a lot of electric motorcycles, and exactly. That helps keep the cost up.
For sure. Mm-hmm. Like they are not going gangbusters in sales. So yeah, you're right. Like, volume would bring prices down, and it's not. So, but let's talk about, so we've talked about like range anxiety. We've talked about price. We've talked about infrastructure, talked about battery density. We've talked about all those things, but there's another thing that is on top of, I think, all that. And that's just the US motorcycling culture. Just culturally, it's a hard sell. Yeah,
there's definitely a mountain to climb to convince American motorcyclists to buy EVs.
Right. We're, especially people older than us in our range, we're used to just the way motorcycles are, the sound, the feel, the noise, all those things are part of the experience. And there's a lot of people that just culturally go, I can't get on board just because it doesn't make a cool noise. Right.
Yeah.
that's definitely something that's there. And so, the motorcycles here are not like we kept saying, oh, they're really good for commuting. But outside of some big urban areas, metropolitan areas, motorcycle commuting is not a thing. Like, you know what I mean? People would rather just hop in their car and not have to worry about getting geared up and going. And so the commuting thing is much smaller than we even feel it is as motorcycle editors, right? It's not massive.
Yeah, well said. Well
so,
said.
People are looking for a toy, and they want their toy to not have limits or less limits.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, maybe like you said, maybe it's our age, because like our images of motorcycles have always been those things, the sound and the smells and
going a long way, traveling.
But there's all these kids. I see them in my neighborhood, like on the Surons and the non-pedaled e-bikes.
Yeah.
And they are, I mean, I'm like out the window, like giving the thumbs up all the time. These guys can wheelie those things like insane. And I'm like on the horn. Nice. Because, they get a lot of hate, on social medias. But so those
like, who's this old man honking at us? I don't like that guy. Just
that's why I'm like, all right, good job. But those kids, like those kids, they don't see them the same way that we did. Our first motorcycles made noise, and they were two-stroke, so they made smells and all those things that they don't care about. Maybe they just care that they don't have to do any maintenance, or other than maybe like Dawes' fork seals.
Yeah, and it gives them freedom in their area, right? Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that Two Wheels has always been, is freedom. It's always been the mover of the masses. Like, you go to other countries and less economically solid or rich countries, and there's way more motorcycles because they're less expensive. And so Two Wheels moves the world more than Four Wheels in some cases. So it's awesome to see kids out riding and doing those things and riding them and getting the experience of two-wheeled fun, so that's super rad. But overall, culturally, I think it's a big sell for the US. We don't look at motorcycles objectively. It's a very subjective, very by the feels sort of vehicle. And I don't know. I think that's always going to be a hurdle for those things.
Yeah, and they kind of feel like appliances,
They can, because they don't. That's the other thing, is the styling. Like, and the stylings are very clean and contemporary, like appliances, and they keep up with the current trends. But at the same time, it would feel very not genuine to build a chrome covered cruiser electric, right? Like, it would just be like, why would you do that? And people would laugh at you. So they're damned if they do, damned if they don't, I think.
Well, there are some that are pretty cool looking. I mean, the Maving, the RM1S or whatever.
Yeah.
That thing looks. I was really surprised. I didn't get to ride it. I was with Bradley. He rode it. I shot it. But like, the fit and finish was fantastic, and the thing just looked cool. And it had a sort of a modern vintage kind of bike look. Yeah, and it was very cool.
Yeah, the battery pack kind of looks like the tank, and it looks very much more traditional than
removable batteries on that thing too. So
that's cool.
Yeah. So okay, well, let's get down to the nitty gritty. We got like 13 minutes left in this bad boy. Let's talk. We're gonna solve all of the electric motorcycle industry's problems right now. In this next 13 minutes, we're going to give them a roadmap on how to fix it and how to sell motorcycles and how to be successful. So what can change all of the naysayers into buyers? Where do we start?
Okay, so it reminds me of when gas prices skyrocketed here in Southern California, like in the early 2000s. Do you guys remember that? Where gas suddenly went up to like $6 from like $3. It was shocking, right? Yeah. And I saw a Nissan dealer they were having trouble getting rid of the giant Nissan Titans,
Mhm.
the big motor and everything. So I think it was an Arizona dealership. If you bought a giant Nissan Titan, they would give you a Versa. You got two cars. So that might be the solution. You buy a Panigale, they'll give you an electric scooter.
There you go.
Dude, that's a great idea.
Well, I mean, hey, well, that's already happened actually. KTM was
Oh.
doing that.
Gas. Yeah.
Gas and Husqvarna were doing that when you would buy a dirt bike for whatever the price was, like $11,000, $12,000. They were throwing in an electric bicycle that was not a inexpensive electric motorcycle, you know.
That should have been a tell for the rest of us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was, well,
It's a different subject, but
yeah, I'll say I told you so till I'm blue in the face. So
it's
but-
possible. So you're saying
Okay.
it's possible.
you're saying it's possible. So yeah, I think, I think to start off with, like you said, but lower prices absolutely need to have parity with their ICE counterparts, right? So if you're looking at an electric and a gas model, and they have the same amount of performance and the same amount of features and the same amount of like level of hardware, they should be close to the same amount of price. I think that would help quite a bit.
Yeah. Obviously price for anything like that, where it's just for Americans is an expensive toy. Price is a hurdle.
Yep. So, and then of course we talked about battery range. I think solid state batteries could be the savior of them, along with a subscription based standardized battery platform.
I like both those ideas, though.
Where
I thought the Go-Go was a game changer when I saw that.
Like if you standardize the battery, you could design the bike whatever shape you wanted, as long as it had the space in it somewhere to fit that battery pack, right? So you could do whatever you wanted to. You could make it look like a cruiser, a sport bike, whatever. It just has to be able to plug this whatever shape they want to use into that space. And I think that would definitely go a long way into, one, you could buy the bike for less money because you wouldn't be buying the battery pack. You'd be leasing it or subscription based or paying for every amount of energy unit you used in that type of swappable battery. Then you don't have to, only buy the motorcycle, and that would bring the cost down. And even though, sure, you may over time spend the same amount of money, the initial purchase price is much more palatable, right?
Yeah. A business model like that might appeal to younger folks anyways, who are sort of accustomed to subscriptions for all kinds of things,
Exactly.
like a cell phone even. People don't buy a cell phone.
Nope.
Not anymore.
Nope. You get it with your plan, you pay as you go, you swap it out every year, you upgrade it. So, that kind of makes a lot of sense. And then, I don't know, like what else do you guys see that could change the face of these bikes and get more people into it?
Probably would make the most sense if the vehicle manufacturer makes a product in a particular segment that's conducive to, an electric motor, like Stark Varg, motocross and electric motors makes a lot of sense. Electric motors and adventure touring doesn't make a lot of sense. So, really you got to make a product in the right segment that is going to be able to marry its buyer. So, that's what I would think. Look at Stark Varg. They're doing really well. They're selling a lot of units. They're probably the only EV manufacturer that is selling a lot of units.
Yeah.
And that's
I see
because
them at the motocross track every time. I always see them there. And
I think that's a very solid point, Adam. Like, for sure. Don't try to, I guess, stretch or overdo it. Like, just stick to what they're good at doing. And stay on point. Like we said, like Energica, like why the heck would they build a touring motorcycle, sport touring motorcycle, when the basis of the bike works against what you're trying to accomplish? It just doesn't work, So
stay with something more purpose built, the obvious use, like the city bike or the motocross track or
track
a
bike.
trials bike, you know, like you
Mhm.
said.
Yep.
Trials bike could
Nobody
be
ever
cool.
complains about the range of a trials bike.
No, absolutely
Yeah.
not.
Trials application would be good for EV.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. Your dog wants to be famous.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
So I think that totally makes sense. And then, I think the last thing is conversion of all these kids that are riding those bikes that you see, Jeff, that are popping wheelies.
Yeah.
You got to convert them into a larger machine as they get older.
Shout out to Huntington Beach. The kids on the Surons doing wheelies.
Yeah. Like, Suron is killing it with all their e-bikes. They're still calling them bikes, not motorcycles, but Suron would be smart and all those other companies to start building motorcycles to keep their people in that ecosystem, because they're already buying Surons, or they're already buying Super 73s, so they're already buying whatever it may be. Once you're in a space or a brand, it's easier to stay in that brand.
Yeah, and I see the Surons at the motocross track as well. Where I ride in Paula, California, they have a Suron or that style or that style bike specific track, like it's built to size for those bikes, and there's a half a dozen bikes on that track every time I go.
Awesome.
And I've been down there. The kids riding the track. I mean, they make modifications to the bikes. They upgrade stuff, and so they're using them up. Yeah,
they're doing their thing, and then they're probably looking at a Stark Varg, going, "Oh, that's the next, right? Ooh, I want one of those."
Yeah, I'm sure.
So right on. Well, it's time to wrap this bad boy up. Takeaways. I think electric motorcycles aren't going anywhere. They're not a replacement. They're just an add-on, but they still have their challenges. That's the clearest part, is they can do some very awesome, rad things, and we really enjoy riding them when we're riding them, but they have their time and their place. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I think
I'd say so.
They got to stop making the range the thing.
Yeah.
Just say it's just for this, and
yeah, exactly.
Like the motocross, like the Varg. Nobody complains about the range of the Varg.
Not for the most part, no. I mean, so yeah, I think that's the takeaways. Is it's a challenging market to be introducing electric motorcycles, but I also think there's a place for them, and they're going to eventually figure out how to sell them better. With that, go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, I was gonna say, and they heard it here, so we solved all the problems.
Yeah, send this to all your CEO motorcycle buddies, right? So with that, again, we want to hear your thoughts on electric motorcycles. Did we make good points? Are we completely insane and deluded and have no idea what we're talking about? Let us know in the comments. If you like what we're doing, hit that like button, subscribe, and we really appreciate you listening. And we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, and let us know if Dawes' dog should make an appearance next time. As long as if we can hear him, we should see him.
Yeah. All right. See you.